Today, we're doing an unprecedented deep dive into the mental architecture of probably the world's most famous free solo climber, Alex Honnold.
That's right. We're looking specifically at how he prepares for these enormous challenges.
Yeah, like his upcoming free solo of the Taipei 101 skyscraper.
Yeah.
And really what that can tell us about managing extreme risk and, mental pressure.
And our listeners sent over a great set of sources, basically detailing his whole philosophy. Risk, fear, how he peaks for a performance. And this isn't a new idea for him. He actually scouted Taipei 101 way back in 2013.
Oh,
Yeah, he said back then it was, quote, uniquely suited for climbing. So our mission here is to really get past the spectacle of it all.
right, the wow factor.
Exactly. And to pull out the counterintuitive lessons on mental toughness that, you can actually apply in your own life, whether that's in a boardroom or, well, maybe on a cliff face.
Okay, so let's start with how he even picks a target. Because it's not just about finding the highest possible drop, right? It's way more calculated than that.
Oh, it is entirely calculated. He's choosing these things based on, like, striking architecture, real aesthetic beauty,
And crucially, possibility.
possibility of success. That's the key. He describes Taipei 101 as being in a perfect sweet spot. It's a huge challenge, of course, but it's not what he calls insanely challenging.
And that distinction is so important because this whole thing is for a massive live TV program.
Which means he has to be able to do it on command.
You can't have a level of risk where you need like a desperate cutting-edge effort to succeed. The chance of failure is just too high.
Right. So what's so fascinating is how he defines that line. Honnold isn't looking for the biggest thrill. He's looking for the maximum certainty of execution under immense pressure.
And we can see that rational approach when you look at the climb he rejected.
The Burj Khalifa.
The Burj Khalifa. He scouted the world's tallest building first, but he decided the moves were just too hard. He said the holds were cutting edge, very slippery, and very, very finicky.
So he just drew a line. It was about security and effort, not just how high the building was.
And just to show how deeply he thinks about this stuff, the sources talk about this.
Yeah.
This crazy solution he briefly considered for the Burj.
This is where it gets truly wild.
I mean, it's unbelievable. He thought about using a D-Day-style parachute as a contingency plan.
Like one of those old school drop chutes, the kind that just slows you down, basically lets you fall straight down.
His thinking was, okay, if he slipped, maybe the chute deploys, he plummets down the face of the building, breaks an ankle, but, he lives.
But he immediately realized that just trying to deploy it would add a whole other layer of unacceptable risk. It was a distraction. He just called the entire idea too extreme and unreasonable.
So the takeaway for you when you're facing your own big moment is really profound. Even the world's most dangerous climber defines his goals by these strict, calculated limits.
Walking away from the Burj because it was unreasonable. That's the opposite of being reckless.
It's success based on risk management, not just guts. It's knowing when to pull back.
Absolutely. But if we move past all the risk calculation for a second, we have to remember what's actually fueling this whole thing.
The engine, yeah.
The engine is still rooted in this really basic, almost visceral joy.
It is. He says over and over that the core joy for him is just the movement of climbing.
He compares it to running or swimming.
Right. It just feels good to do the thing.
Yeah.
I read he often goes for a quick climb at the gym right before doing interviews. It's like a reset for him.
And if you look at his background, his whole career was sort of an accident. He started climbing at 10, which is actually kind of old for elite climbers these days.
Grew up in suburban California, and for the first 8 years, he was only climbing indoors at a gym. It wasn't about these grand mountains at first.
No, his original plan was to be a mountain guide. The whole professional climber thing only happened because he started getting free gear.
And then came the van.
And then the van. He lived in a van for 12 years, from about age 20 to 30. It was a super low overhead lifestyle. And for years, he said he saw himself as a homeless person living in a van who happens to get climbing shoes for free.
It took him a long time to actually think of himself as a professional.
But what connects that whole story, that accidental career, is this idea of play. He was the kid who loved climbing trees and walls, broke his arm 3 times falling off play structures.
So the adult pursuit is just a hyper-disciplined version of that same childhood joy.
Exactly.
But how do you get from that, breaking your arm on the monkey bars freedom to the kind of technical mastery you need to free solo a skyscraper?
Well, it takes an insane amount of technical skill that I think most people misunderstand.
Right. Everyone thinks it's all pull-ups and upper body strength.
But Honnold stresses it's a full body thing. You should think of it more like climbing a really steep staircase. Your legs are doing the work, they're the engine, your hands are just for balance.
Like a handrail.
Exactly like a handrail.
Okay, but here's something that really surprised me. He says his biggest physical weakness, compared to other pros, is his finger strength.
Which is, it's totally counterintuitive, right? Finger strength, which is really your forearm grip, is usually the one thing that limits elite climbers on tiny little holds.
So how does he compensate?
With technique. Because he knows it's a weakness, he's developed this incredibly efficient technique where he transfers as much weight as possible to his feet. It takes the load off his fingers.
And he still trains it, obviously.
Oh, yeah. He builds that grip strength by hanging from smaller and smaller edges, sometimes with extra weight strapped on. It's all about intentionally managing a limitation through skill.
So that intentionality shows up in his training schedule.
Yeah.
For Taipei 101, he's doing 3 to 5 hour sessions 5 days a week.
But he's quick to point out that time isn't the best way to measure it. Effort is what really matters.
Right. He makes a distinction between those super intense sessions and then these low intensity days.
Yeah, where he might spend 6 or 8 hours, just as he puts it, strolling in the mountains, figuring things out. He says sometimes he walks back without having climbed a single thing.
But that's still part of the work, the problem solving.
That's crucial mapping and problem-solving time. And the peaking for this January climb is pure sports science. He started ramping up about 2.5 months out.
Because the body can only take so much, right?
Exactly. You can only sustain that, maximum hard effort for maybe 3 to 6 weeks before you need to deload, active rest. So his plan is just a simple, strategic ramp to peak right before the event.
Which brings us to the mind. I think this is the most fascinating part of his whole system.
It is. Everyone talks about that 2016 brain scan study.
The one that said his amygdala, the brain's fear center, didn't light up like a normal person's.
Right, but Honnold has a totally different take on that study. He completely reframes it.
He argues it doesn't mean his brain is, broken or fundamentally different.
It just means he spent 30 years practicing how to manage fear.
And he made the point that, looking at black and white photos of spiders in an MRI machine it's just not actually scary, not compared to the real-life consequences he deals with.
The test was flawed. So instead of being fearless, he's used to it. He admits he's always scared, at least a little bit.
But that constant low-level exposure changes his whole relationship with fear. He kind of puts everything else in perspective.
And he uses this incredible metaphor for it that we have to talk about.
Hunger analogy.
The hunger analogy. He says fear is just a sensation, like hunger. When you feel hungry, you don't panic.
You just acknowledge it, and you'll deal with it in due time.
It's such a powerful way to think about it. It turns fear from this overwhelming emotion into just data, a signal. He thinks the average person finds fear so debilitating because they experience real acute risk so rarely.
So it hits them like a ton of bricks. For him, it's just a constant, dull background noise.
Right.
But how does he actually do that? I mean, hunger doesn't give you vertigo when you're 1,000 feet up.
Well, when he gets scared on a wall, he just stops. He takes deep breaths. He composes himself. Since there's no time pressure, he can just hold a position and analyze the feeling.
Is the fear well-founded?
Exactly. Is the rock quality bad? Do I need to bail? Or is it unwarranted? Is my body just reacting to the height, even though I know this hold is solid?
And if it's unwarranted, he just sets it aside and makes the move.
Yeah.
Which tells you that when he's free soloing, he is staying well within his limits.
Oh, absolutely. He saves the roped climbing for pushing his limits, for growth. Free soloing is all about flawless execution. Failure is not an option.
And this is where it gets really interesting how this mindset transfers or doesn't transfer to other parts of life.
He's very open about this. He says managing physical risk is way easier for him than managing, say, relationship issues.
And he even jokes his wife would say he still has a long ways to go on that front.
It's fascinating, isn't it? He can rationalize the fear of immediate death, but the fear of, emotional conflict is still overwhelming. He can control the physical variables, but not the emotional ones.
Yeah. He gives another example, public speaking.
Right. He said it used to be horrifying for him, but practice made it comfortable because he realized there are no real stakes.
You might make a fool of yourself, but you're not going to die. The risk is just humiliation, and that passes.
And that mastery of execution depends so heavily on the next step, visualization.
Which all climbers do, but his approach is just. It's on another level. It's about remembering the precise mechanics, left hand here, drop the left hip, and imagining the sensations.
How is a slippery foothold going to feel? What's the texture going to be like under his fingers?
And here's the paradox of free soloing. He can practice the route 100 times with a rope.
But he can never truly practice how it will feel without the rope. So visualization has to fill that huge gap. He imagines different conditions, humidity, dryness, cold.
And for Taipei 101, he's using a new technique, because it's a man-made structure. He actually asked the production for footage of the building.
And get this, clips of himself climbing other things so he can review his own performance.
That's a massive advantage. It's like a pro athlete reviewing game tape. He's analyzing his own movements to see what he can do better.
And crucially, he says he does not visualize success. No standing on the cop celebrating. He calls that totally irrelevant.
Visualization is only for the important details and the potential consequences.
Right.
For the layperson, he says, just think of it as daydreaming, really intensely about the things that matter to you.
And part of that daydreaming is processing the absolute worst-case scenarios.
Right. He thinks about falling, about bouncing hundreds of feet before the climb.
Which sounds morbid, but it's not. It's like an inoculation.
It's anticipatory horror. You process the terror in advance, so when you're on the wall, it's already been dealt with. You can just focus on execution. It removes the emotional paralysis.
And he's a master at managing psychological pressure. For El Capitan, the biggest climb of his life, he used a strategy he called stacking goals.
Which is brilliant. He made El Cap just one part of his normal climbing season. He already had expeditions to Alaska and Antarctica lined up for right after.
So psychologically, El Cap wasn't the ultimate be-all, end-all goal. It was just a really hard stepping stone on the way to the next thing.
It was just part of the job.
It was just part of the workflow.
So let's zoom out a bit. Look at his life and legacy. Because it's not just about climbing anymore. He started the Honnold Foundation.
Right, which supports community solar projects. And the origin story for that foundation says everything about his values.
Came from a commercial shoot. He made 6 figures for, what, a day and a half of fun work?
And given his low overhead van life, he just felt that money was, it was unjust. It was disproportionate. So the foundation became a way to funnel the money into something actually useful.
It wasn't driven by ego. It was driven by a sense of financial responsibility.
And his personal routine is still incredibly dialed in. He's a vegetarian, eats mostly whole foods, no extra sugar. He thinks it helps his performance and, it aligns with his environmental views.
And sleep is non-negotiable. 8 hours a night, even with 2 small kids.
Yeah, he has a daughter who's almost 4 and another who's almost 2, and he points out that this isn't his first big climb as a father.
He did that cutting-edge free solo in Jordan for the Sphere project. He said he wondered if being a dad would change things, but once he was up there, he was just so psyched.
The passion was still there. And his parenting philosophy is basically his climbing philosophy. He lets his kids explore and get hurt, but he focuses on preventing the catastrophic injuries.
Calculated risk.
It's calculated exposure to safe risks so they can learn their own limits.
And when he looks at himself, he calls himself a recovered perfectionist with lazy tendencies.
Which might be the biggest insight of all. His sweet spot isn't obsessive control over everything. It's working incredibly hard on the things he really cares about, like climbing, and not stressing about the rest.
It's focused effort, not universal perfection.
And that focus was captured perfectly in a letter he got from his mentor, Tommy Caldwell. Honnold, of course, received it with his typical deep discomfort with public affection. But Tommy nailed Honnold's superpower. He said it's his unwavering belief in a positive outcome and his ability to reframe things until they suddenly feel manageable.
And that reframing, that's the core takeaway here. Honnold takes fear, breaks it into pieces, and turns it into data. He takes risk, analyzes it, and finds that spot where execution is almost guaranteed.
So what does all this mean for you? For your next big project, your biggest deadline? Well, Honnold mentioned this old story about putting 3 things into boiling water: a potato, an egg, and some coffee beans.
Okay.
The boiling water, that's the external pressure, the discomfort, the high-stakes meeting, the physical strain.
But the outcome for each thing is totally different. The potato goes in hard and comes out soft and weak.
The egg goes in fragile and comes out hardened.
But the coffee beans, they change the water itself. They release their best qualities under the pressure.
The reaction to the pressure is always internal. It depends on what you are, or maybe what you've practiced being.
So when you are exposed to that kind of discomfort, physical, professional, whatever it is, the final question we want to leave you with is this. Are you the potato, the egg, or the coffee bean? What are you choosing to become under the heat?
That is something to keep top of mind when you face your own personal peak.
Thank you for diving into the sources with us today.